This is Home Games. Thanks for being here with us. That is Bubba O'Neill right below me from CHCH TV Sports. Beside him, Steve Milton, sports columnist with the Hamilton Spectator, Hall of Famer, by the way, too, in a number of Hall of Fames, including best hair on the panel. And beside me in the top row, Rick Zamperin from 900 CHML Radio. I am Scott Radley from the Hamilton Spectator and 900 CHML. And as we talked about in a previous Home Games, go look it up. Go to Home Games Hamilton on YouTube to find it. We were talking about the cuts to the sports media business in the last few days and the future of sports media. Well, let's dive in, Bubba, to a little subset of that, if you will, a little secondary part. Many in the last number of weeks and months, most of the cuts have been to TSN, which is the rights holder, the carrier, the main driver, the chief bottle washer, whatever you want to call it, for the CFL. What impact do cuts like this at radio and TV across the country, what impact do the cuts to TSN have on the CFL across this land?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to do as best as they can, TSN, to try and limit what you see, and certainly, but I don't think you can hide what's going on in the industry in terms of radio. I think streaming services is a reality that's, I think if there's a season in 2021, I don't know if you're going to be able to go to, your dial on AM at 900 or 1050 or 1150 or 1210 and find your game. I think it's going to be a reality of what's going on and what the Argos actually did about 3 years ago, where they broadcasted all of their home games on the internet with Mike Hogan, I believe, is their play-by-play guy. And I think that's the way it's going to go. It's TSN streaming service to listen to your home broadcast. I think that's the immediate aspect. If there's any type of layover on television, I'm probably guessing with the cuts, you're probably going to see smaller staffs. You're probably going to see, less of a panel. Maybe that panel that's been about 3 to 5 deep, probably cut down to about 2.
Yeah, I think those are really good points and their potential. I really want to see what happens there. I think like what you actually see on the screen at any one time, you're going to see something. It's going to be on there, right? So I mean, they got to put something on the screen. I don't know yet how much secondary cuts there'll be. How much will be in the technician part? Will they go with 5 instead of 4? Or TSN, compared to the way the CBC say used to really notice the difference. At baseball, there'd be many, many more people there at CBC. Everybody's got leaner now, and TSN was really good, and they use a lot of freelancers on the technical side of that. Let's just see where they go with that. We'll never know, but it could affect a few things. The other thing would be the secondary things, like a second sideline reporter, all of those kinds of things that add meat to it. And I agree. In fact, I wrote about it in the Spec this week. I think I got a feeling they're going to give the rights free to somebody to run it for a couple of years over the radio. I don't know. I don't have that from anybody, but that would seem to make sense in the transition period. But until they go fully, but it's going to be streaming. There's no doubt. Even you can read between the lines. You don't even have to read between the lines, and that's the way it can go. But one of the problems with that is you can end up preaching with having everything in-house. You can end up preaching to the converted.
Yep.
And a broader coverage, and let's see where that goes with TSN and with Sportsnet of the CFL mentioning and how many of these people like the CFL that were cut, and so they don't sort of fight to maybe get it mentioned. That's who you want. You want the casual fans to be reminded of the CFL as well as your own people.
I think the cuts are bad. There's no other way to look at it. Bad for the Canadian Football League because there are fewer people, there are a few stations, obviously, telling the CFL's story. So whether it's in Vancouver or whether it's here in Hamilton or in Winnipeg or whatever the case is, you now have outlets that are not talking about the CFL. You have reporters and anchors who are not talking about the Canadian Football League, their players, the franchises, the owners, the history of the game. Teaching the younger generation about, the stars of yesteryear. That's a bad thing because we want to keep this conversation going. We want to talk about, the big game last night or the big game coming up, and fewer stations are now tied to the Canadian Football League. I think that's a bad mistake, A, on Bell's part, but B, I think CFL fans lose out on that connection as well.
Let me use an example for a second, and it's not football, but it ties to it. When the UFC was really starting to ramp up, one of the things that is really cited as getting it going and building a huge audience was The Ultimate Fighter, the reality show. And the reason is you've got the cards, and people watch that who are really diehards. But the Ultimate Fighter gave you a different look and engaged you in the stories before they got to the card.
Right.
And that to me is what the radio stations do. Yeah, the people who are going to watch the games on CFL are going to watch the games. But all through the week, the stories, the discussions, the quarterback controversies, the who's starting, who's hurt, is the coach an idiot, all the stuff that generates real talking points and real interest. That's, you're still going to have TV games, but a lot of the people who may have been drawn in with the hype and everything else, if those opportunities are gone, it hurts the league. It does. It hurts the league because the narrative and the talking points and the arguments and all the rest are less. Simple.
Going back to the game, and let me throw this to you guys, and you guys can comment. One of the wonderful things is, have some patience here with me. One of the wonderful things about baseball is that you can, on a Saturday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon or Sunday night, you can go about your business and listen to the game on radio. You can be out cutting the grass, doing your gardening. Now, if these games are going to be streamed online, and again, remembering that the CFL skews to an older audience, do they know how to put on the technology to sit there and listen to the game when you can't particularly be in front of the television? I mean, do most of us have the ability to listen to a game online when you're in your car or you're out there cutting the grass or doing, anything that keeps you away from being in front of the television? And that's something I think people have to be concerned about.
That's a good point. And I think both CHML and TSN 1150 will tell you that the best games were often Saturday afternoon because people were in the car. And the rest of the time they're not. They're at home. They'll watch it on television. Now, a lot of people don't have anything more than basic cable, and you hear from those people. That's why my guess would be in the Ticats case, there'll be a transition period there. It's only a guess. Nobody's telling you. They don't want to talk about it, and I don't blame them because they're in the middle of trying to figure out what's what. First of all, the Grey Cup at this moment, they're working on that, and then secondly, working on the season. So this is probably number 3 priority there. But also, they want to get it right as much as they can beforehand. Cuts are never good. And Scott's exactly right. It's the tangential stories. The CFL, one of the reasons that it kind of failed in its bid when they went to the government, besides it was a lousy presentation, I was that they hadn't fully established what they need to argue. And that is, it's a cultural institution. That's the overarching thing of A, a business, B, a league. It's the thing that makes them different. It's the third part, the cultural institution part. Yeah. And cultural institutions come from the things you do in the community, talking to the fans. And that's exactly what Scott was saying. If you staff cuts could end, and fewer people covering fewer stations could end up hurting that, which is the building up of the cultural part and telling the great stories. Of course, there's no league with more incredible stories in it than the CFL because of where so many of the players have come from.
I think teams like, the Ticats, every team really in the CFL, I think needs a partnership with a radio station in particular, no different than they would with a TV station, not necessarily for the games, but for all the other stuff, the talk before and after the game, the lead up, special interviews, special events, highlighting key community, initiatives. That partnership, that community kind of partnership, I think really is priceless. Obviously there's a price tag to it, but that talk throughout the week leading up to the game or even after the game is really what I think teams and the league needs.
I think that's a great point because I think that's a great point because you look at television and coming from a television background where you can only spend minute times about particular topics, where you can expand on a TSN radio affiliate for maybe 2 hours, an hour of conversation. Who should be the starting quarterback for the Tiger Cats, Masoli or Evans? You can expand on those topics, whether they're hot takes or not, whether it's phone calls or not. These are expanded conversations that build hype for a football game, and I think you can't lose that.
There's nobody here in this panel that's not going to, if the Ticats bring them somebody, there's nobody here on your stations that's going to say no.
Right.
Not in this market.
Not in this market, but as we go, the other challenge you have, of course, is that we have 2 competing sets of sports networks, sports radio stations. We've got the Rogers stations and we've got the TSN stations. And because TSN is the rights holder, traditionally Rogers stations don't like to plump up too much of what TSN has. They'll mention it. Some places it's, in Regina, they'll certainly talk about it no matter what. But there's a number of the networks. There's a number of, the cities where the Roger stations just, they'll mention it, they'll give the score, they'll talk about it briefly. But when the station that the rights holder belongs to is gone, boy, you just know the amount of conversation about the league goes down, and the amount of conversation about the local NHL team or the Jays or the Raptors or whatever else fills the time, and the TSN gets and the CFL gets left behind. What do you think?
It's hard to gauge that from a monetary sense, and let's not forget what if people going to online broadcasting is partly about. It's monetizing, it's identifying your customers. It's selling to, particularly in Hamilton and Saskatchewan's case, where there are fans all over the world already once in a while tuning into they don't always get the, whoever's got it, they don't always go to the .ca there and get the streaming off of that station, but they know they can get it off the Ticats. That gives them, first of all, that tells the Ticats who's there because of the algorithms, right? Not just the Ticats, it's anything. Bob Young, when he talked to me, wouldn't talk about the Ticats, only about sports in general, and that's the way it's going. And they're really, it's hard to monetize over-the-air radio in any shape or form, although there's a soft monetization by the types of things you three are all four of us are talking about, which is the heightening of the market. But
what do you think? Is TSN's radio stations being shut down in 3 of the CFL's market a big deal and impactful? Or will other radio stations in those markets just pick it up and keep the thing going, and there will be no difference at all? We think, all of us, it will have an impact on the CFL, but we'd love to hear from you. Comment down below, subscribe down below, stay with us, know when we're coming up. If you subscribe, you'll be notified when another video is coming. We'd love for you to watch. We'll talk to you soon.